So they are completely lying. Salah el-Aruri, the commander of Hamas in the West Bank, claimed that the orders were not to target civilians, but this is a blatant lie. Because the Israeli army was able to catch their documents, the orders that the Hamas terrorists received, and in the orders, for example, in the rural community of Alumim, it was written precisely that the Hamas terrorists should kill all Israeli civilians we encounter indiscriminately. And in another document, there was a code word called black for a contingency to kill all hostages immediately. So now we know from their own documents that their intentions were genocidal.
Danny, stay on with us, because it's not just about killing people. There are videos now coming to fore and reactions coming in from experts that suggest that there was torture involved. There was no dignity after death as well. Such was the wickedness of Hamas horror that even autopsy experts who are used to seeing bodies every day were shell-shocked and broke down while narrating the horror of Hamas terrorists. Listen in.
Several bodies was brought to us in a terrible exposition. Most of them were burned, and with this case, we can see an adult and a kid that were tied together. We can see here also the kid ribs. Also, we can see here some pieces of skull. Okay, and we can see a part of the almost complete cranium skull in the upper part of the CT examination.
We see here one of the cases which is an example to the atrocities that we have seen in the tragic event and in Israel. This is a burned body, of course, of an adult, but we know that he was burned while he was alive because see soot in the trachea of this person, and they couldn't shoot him because he was inside a shelter. So they burned the house, and everybody that was inside was burned while he was alive. And this is only one example of many atrocities and many horrific things that we are seeing here in this tragedy that happened to Israel. I'm 31 years a forensic pathologist. I'm used to see dead people, but I never saw people that are conjoined together while they are burned, trying to hug each other. I'm sorry.
Well, it's day 10 of the Israel-Hamas war, and Netanyahu's forces are inching closer to the Gazan province. Tanks, artillery, guns and other ground forces are waiting for the evacuations of civilians from north to the south to move in for one final showdown. However, in that buffer period, Israel continues to strike enemy targets on the other side of the border. Before we take more, here's a look at the evacuation plan.
Viewers, the Israeli Defense Forces have issued a directive to the people living in Gaza City to evacuate from north to the south. Now, let me tell you how this entire scenario will pan out and how the Israelis have asked the people of Gaza to relocate from north to south. So this is Israel, that is Egypt, and this red zone that we have demarcated is the Gaza Strip. Now here you'll have to understand three important points: the Erie's crossing, Gaza City, as well as the Rafah crossing. So people here, 1.1 million people living in Gaza City have been asked to relocate from here all the way to the Rafah crossing, and this entire stretches for about 25 miles. So only from the Erie's crossing till Wadi Gaza, it's about 10 miles, and from here till the Rafah crossing, it's about 15 miles. Now what we have to note here is that 2.2 million people live in the Gaza Strip, and people believe that it is very hard for them to relocate within a stipulated time of 24 hours because a lot of destruction has taken place in Gaza after Hamas terrorists were seen fighting, or rather launching terror attacks from residential localities. So Israel had to bombard a few residential localities where they felt that Hamas terrorists were hiding out. Now what is difficult is that the Gaza City also houses about 1.1 million people, along with 11 hospitals and 3 UN compounds, and it becomes very hard for all of them to relocate to the Rafah crossing in just 24 hours. And another important point which has to be noted here is that the Rafah crossing continues to remain closed, and whether or not Egypt will open it for Gaza refugees remains to be seen.
Sadly, viewers, while Hamas terrorists are refusing to allow Gazans from evacuating, on the other hand, Israeli Air Force continues its operation to take out terror dens and operatives of Hamas groups. In one such operation, the Israeli jets annihilated a hideout of a Hamas southern commander. While Hamas continues to launch rockets after rockets into Israel, the IDF launched an air search party to track down the launch pads. During the hunt for the rocket launchers, IDF and the Israel Air Force were shocked to find that the rockets were being fired from residential localities. Wasting no time, the Air Force jets flattened these launch pads in airstrikes. On the other hand, IDF has seized terror arsenal. Israel Defense Forces confiscated a large cache of weapons and supplies from Hamas terrorists amid the attack against Israel. The weaponry removed from Hamas's possession included rockets, grenades, rocket-propelled grenades and ammunition. The IDF pointed to labels on the weaponry that it says show the materials were produced by Hamas. The seized weapons account for just 20% of the ones used by Hamas to kill Israelis. According to the IDF, all the confiscated weapons were used in October 7 attacks against Israel.
All the munitions that you can see in here is about approximately 20% of what Hamas terrorists brought on their vehicles. You can see different kinds of shaped charges, rockets, RPG, grenades, all kinds of stuff around here. You can see by the amount of munitions, the medical equipment and food that they brought with them that they were prepared for long term in our villages. You can see by the symbols on all the equipment that everything is homemade of Hamas. Homemade production.
And as the evacuations continue, the IDF has released a video showing Hamas terrorists storming and killing innocents in an Israel neighborhood. Watch this shocking sequence.
دخل جوا. ايه أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. دخل جوا. إيه؟ أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
Even as people from North Gaza move towards the south after IDF's directive for evacuation, drone footage shows widespread destruction of parts of Gaza City as a result of Israel's war with Hamas. Many residential buildings were flattened to rubble. High-rise buildings were reduced to ashes. Over 2,600 have been killed and over 9,000 have sustained injuries, while the region continues to suffer without power, water or food supplies. Danny Orbach continues to be with us on the broadcast. You know, while of course Israel says this is a war against Hamas, a war against terrorism, innocent individuals are losing their life on both sides, and Israel also come under criticism for continuously bombarding or carrying out airstrikes in the residential areas as well. How do you respond to that?
I think this is a completely hypocritical criticism from people who don't know the reality of war. The reality is that the Hamas is shooting and hiding among civilians. They don't care about international law at all. We saw that previously. And now they want to hide behind civilians and enjoy the protection of the laws we don't care about. It's like a moral hazard. So they are doing whatever they want. They ignore international law. And then they expect humanitarian-inclined people to protect them and help them so they can rearm and launch another attack. This is gone. This is like ISIS. This is like the Nazis. And Israel has to do whatever possible to remove this threat, also for the benefit of Palestinians. Hamas cannot be in the region, and they cannot hide behind civilians. This is over.
Right. You know, there were reports that also came in that despite Israel asking civilians to evacuate, Hamas is not letting them because it clearly is using them as a shield.
Completely. Hamas wants to use the civilian as human shields. Actually, we know from intercepted conversations that Hamas does not only place roadblocks on the main arteries of transport to southern Gaza, it is also taking car keys from people and locking them up, preventing them from leaving in order to maximize the civilian deaths in Gaza. By the way, many Palestinians in Gaza could have been protected from at least some Israeli airstrikes where their shelters, air raid shelters. Hamas didn't build air raid shelters, and this was on purpose because they want as many civilians as possible to die in order to bring international interference against Israel. I hope it won't work this time.
Right. Danny Orbach, thank you very much for giving us your time. Thank you for speaking to us on the broadcast.